All right. Welcome everyone to Raising the New Earth podcast. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Noah.
We are super excited today because we have an amazing guest that both Brooke and I actually admire and adore her work and everything she stands for. Her name is Dr. Catherine Clinton. She's a licensed naturopathic physician. She focuses on gut health, autoimmunity, and psychoneuroimmunology. She is a respected and wonderful author and speaker, pediatric and health advocate. And we are excited to have her today. So, welcome to Raising the New Earth podcast, Dr. Catherine. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. It is wonderful to meet you guys in kind of person, right? In virtual person.
Mhm.
And I am really excited to dive into some of my favorite topics today.
Yes. So, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you transition from naturopathy to quantum biology? What is quantum biology and the whole nine yards?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I assisted with an indigenous midwife from Mexico. She actually was my midwife like a decade later. And I saw she's now a quantum healer. And I saw her doing things in her practice that I had never seen before and were absolutely amazing. And at the same time, I knew I wasn't cut out to be a midwife. I needed to have that closed sign. And midwives are incredible and always there to support the moms and babies. And I knew that I wasn't cut from the same cloth. So I looked into naturopathic medical school. And I had a degree, an undergrad degree in philosophy. So I had to go back and do all my pre-med stuff. Everything I avoided, like the plague, I found myself in after graduating. But it was a wonderful education. And I went to naturopathic medical school in Portland. And my second year was sort of that initiation year where long hours, you have to sign in by 7 a.m. If you miss the sign in, you flunk the class and have to wait till the next year to redo it, kind of, just that classic medical school initiation. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And that second year, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is a condition that affects an autoimmune condition that affects the GI tract. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto thyroiditis, autoimmune condition that affects the thyroid. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, multiple GI parasites, all kinds of stuff. It was like that domino effect, right? One fell and the rest soon fell too. But I was in the perfect place to kind of piece my physical health back together. And a mentor at the time was really pushing me to look at psychoneuroimmunology. And that's just a big word for how our thoughts and emotions impact our health. And at the time, I was also studying mitochondrial function and researching that. And those two things sort of blew the doors open on quantum biology. And I just haven't left because it's so fascinating. And, a lot of people, when I say that, the next question is, what is quantum biology? What in the world are you talking about? And so quantum biology is a new emerging field that looks at quantum phenomenon like tunneling, superposition, coherence, entanglement in living systems, in plants, in animals, in our own biology. And it also is looking at the smallest pieces of our biology down to the nanoscale and how they are impacted by quanta pieces of light, of sound, frequency information in our environment, internally and externally. So it's this fascinating look at how the smallest pieces of our biology work in tandem with the world around us. And we can see these quantum phenomenon happening where we thought they would absolutely never happen, right? Because a quantum physicist researching these quantum phenomenon really control their environment, right? So if I was a quantum physicist looking at entanglement in an experiment, I would make sure that my laboratory is completely soundproof, so that there's no sound, no vibration. It's cooled. The laboratory would be cooled below absolute zero, where no life can exist, right? So when quantum biology first sort of started gaining evidence in the lab in the early 2000s, quantum physicists across the globe were like, absolutely not. This is not how it works. You can't have quantum phenomenon in a wet, messy biological system. And now we're finding that that wet, messy chaos of life in a living system is actually what's adding that coherence and adding that stability to some of those quantum phenomenon in our biology. And it's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things I really like about it, I mean, there's so many different things I like about it, but it really reduces things down to the smallest pieces. And when we look at it from that standpoint, we start to see how interconnected it all is. Those small pieces are connected to the next small piece, to the next small piece, to the person outside of you, to the sun, to the dirt, to the plants, to the wind. It's all interconnected web. And it takes us a step away from that reductionistic science that says every small piece is individual and it is not connected. It has its own isolated function. And if it does affect something else, it's because that isolated being goes and does something to something else, rather than an actual physical continuum that we see in quantum biology, which I'm very hopeful will start to change our perspective on medicine and science and life, really taking us from, you know, the top of the pyramid, so to speak, in the ecosystem, and really enmeshing us where we should be. So I am continually fascinated by it and absolutely love it, and hope that it spurs the paradigm shift that we so desperately need right now in medicine.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think as a student that studies quantum integrative medicine right now, I feel that over the past few decades, scientists have made incredible progress in that understanding and manipulating biological systems at increasingly small scale. So from protein folding to genetic engineering, and yet the extent to which quantum effects influence living systems remains barely understood. So I am still hopeful that, you know, for humans, we can only perceive the macroscopic world or what's visible to the naked eye, but quantum mechanics can be that, you know, is right now can be perceived as counterintuitive to somewhat something really magical that is so hard to explain, and yet it exists. It is there. It is part of nature.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so quantum counterintuitive. I get that a lot. Just immediate, like, whoosh, that's not true. That's not happening. That's a buzzword you're using to get attention. And it's like, wow, the pushback is, I always find it really interesting because there's never you know, like 15 seconds to search on an internet search engine. Is that true? Is there evidence? You know, it's just this like, nope, we live in this kind of world. Stop pushing the boundaries, stop trying to redefine things. And it's interesting because that, you know, when you look at the history of science and medicine, that's absolutely a very common response to any new findings. I mean, Hooke, when he found microbes under the microscope, he had fashioned a microscope that was much more powerful than the other microscopes at the time. And so everybody was like, you are out of your mind. This is not, there are not little beans all over the place that we can't see. And then, you know, within a span of 20 years, the microscopes evolved and people were like, oh, okay, you're right. And there is this entire world of microscopic beings at play that we can't see. And so, yeah, it's an interesting reaction we have as humans to change. And I'm no different. If the change was something else, like how to do my laundry or something like that, just what do you mean? But with quantum biology, I'm all for it, because I really do see how it interconnects life, and at the same time it calls us to take care of the natural terrain around us. So those two things are really, really important to me. And that's one of the reasons that I'm drawn to quantum biology.
Yeah. Going deeper into that, like one of kind of my questions, I will back up and say, I've heard that Einstein quoted as saying that the future of medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. And so I think you've kind of gone into a little bit of like why maybe we've been hesitant to embrace that from like a biological and medicine standpoint. And I just kind of just going deeper into that, like, do you feel like that is just this, it's just such a big paradigm shift, just as when, the earth was thought to be flat and then it was round and everything changed, that like, there's so much that has to change when we look more from that paradigm. Or is there, other things going on? You even mentioned that it's harder to study, that like from a laboratory perspective of, controlling different variables and stuff. But I guess in that same breath of going deeper into that, where do you see the opportunities for healing using quantum biology? And, are we getting there? Like, do you see kind of the progress there? What kind of shifts do you need to occur to embrace it more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, and there are going to be people that would disagree with me, right? But I would say that quantum biology encompasses so many things. So it encompasses how our biology is impacted by frequency, by electromagnetic frequency, by oscillation, just pure movement of proteins, and like you mentioned, protein folding, as well as light, circadian rhythm. And this is something that we just have a wealth of knowledge about, and the benefits of that. And so when it comes to quantum biology, there are definitely some pieces that would be wonderful to have more evidence and continued research into. But at the same time, there are other avenues that have been really sussed out, and we continue to research in those areas. But for example, circadian medicine, every single cell in our body has a circadian clock, and every single biological action in our body is dictated by this relationship with the sun and with light. And so this is something that's not mysterious anymore. It's well defined, well acknowledged, yet it hasn't made its way into the halls of medicine, so to speak. So if I went to the doctor today with a cardiovascular issue, and I asked them, well, I work nights, or I don't get outside very much, is there, like, what role does sunlight play in my cardiovascular health? I mean, that would just not at all be addressed, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think the issue is it also gets really hard because research is funded. And most of the research is funded by governmental agencies, right? Like the NIH and different agencies that fund research that leads to somewhere. And that somewhere usually is a pharmaceutical drug or a medical device. And so if your research isn't directly leading to something like that, it's really hard to get to get funding. And then on top of that, you have just human nature, right? So we have this again, wealth of information about something as simple as water and the impacts of water on our biology. And it has become sort of taboo in certain scientific circles to talk about different phases of water, to talk about how water acts in biology. I was reading something the other day, a beautiful study about electrolytes and water structuring. And at the end of the study was a big paragraph about how this is not associated with water memory or structured water or any of that crazy, wacky stuff out there. This is real science. And it's like, it is real science. And so is the stuff around structured water and biological water and water memory. And that whatever it is in human nature to not want to go outside the status quo, to not want to be the researcher that is doing the weird stuff. I'm so very grateful for all the researchers out there that are not hindered by that idea or hindered by that societal or scientific circle status quo, because that's where we find discoveries. And if anyone today thinks that we are at the pinnacle of medicine and health, that's just scary and very disheartening, and just not how human evolution works. We're constantly discovering new things, but at the same time, our willingness to change doesn't keep pace with that, right? So even though we're finding all this new stuff, our willingness to change is way down here, because of that societal pressure of what it means to be researching structured water or water memory or quantum biology overall. You know, again, I read another study where someone was saying, you know, quantum biology, and they were talking about entangled protons in the water lining our neurons in our brain, and how this is real science, and it has nothing to do with those wacky theories about consciousness and quantum biology. And it's like, I love the science that they are doing, but it just makes me bite my lip when they have to add that in there because they feel the need to distinguish themselves from the newer science that's coming out. And it's disheartening, yet at the same time, they know about it enough to distance themselves from it, and people are talking about it enough. I was just talking with someone else about how if we can get this message out to the people and have the people go demand something different from their doctors, then that's when we'll start to see change, because the doctors will demand something different from the scientists and vice versa. And so I really see quantum biology being sort of a from the bottom up movement, because a lot of it is free and accessible. It doesn't have to do with fancy devices or supplements or, you know, $2,000 doctor visits. It has to do with our relationship with the world around us. And not that those things don't have a place and can help with our health, but to really create a grassroots movement to change our perspective on life and health and medicine, I couldn't think of a better way to do it than from the bottom up, from the people demanding, like, this is sick care. We are now looking for health care. And this is what we're hearing. What do you know about it? And why don't you know about it? So I see a lot of hope in that as well.
Absolutely.
That's so true. And so I love how you said that, because what you're saying, I feel like that is happening right now. Like, I think that there's just over the past couple years, even there's been a large awakening to kind of this path that we're marching down. And a lot of people saying, whoa, is this really, you know, like you saying, the idea of being at the pinnacle of medicine and science. I think that maybe the large majority of people that maybe thought we were are kind of seeing where that's kind of maybe steering us wrong and are looking for other places, and especially those who really are looking to heal and that they're not getting answers from, the traditional medicine approach, and they want to explore those alternate things. So I think that's beautiful and so spot on to what we see happening at the moment.
Yeah, it brings me a lot of hope. I am very hopeful, and I see this as really like a grassroots movement. These researchers that are doing this are mavericks, and they are so brave, and they are constantly challenged. And doctors who are talking about this and practicing this, the same thing. They are constantly receiving pushback, but it's just absolutely ridiculous in another sense, that the idea that going outside and being in nature is somehow a dangerous health advice is just where are we again? So we have a lot of work to do, but I'm hopeful.
One of my professors is Dr. Amit Goswami, and he was quoted saying that consciousness is the ground of all being. And I love that, because I think that studying that framework of the mind body medicine integrated with principles of quantum physics, it does result in paradigm shift for the healers and for the healee, with full accountability to their process of healing. So us as the healers, we're guiding them, but it's on them to be co-guided and lead their path into full healing, and that it empowers us with peace rather than oppresses us with fear. Oh my God, you got XYZ, so here's a pill to to not even address the root cause, to not address the mind body integrated relationship that you have currently. So I think always healing is always within reach with the proper mind, and I'm personally really hopeful to have these programs available that were probably not available years ago as a postgraduate degree. So I am with you. There is concern, but there is certainly a lot of hope around that being the flag.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I love your professor, Goswami. I went to the University of Oregon, where he was based, and he actually came to our medical school and did a talk. It was I can't remember the name, but he and Fred Allen Wolf and there were quite a few experts that were talking about this. And it was during that time of my second year where I was so sick, and it was so wonderful to have that fresh perspective, and that perspective that is really guided by knowledge and science. And not that there's anything wrong with intuitive guidance, because I think that that's what we're finding with quantum biology, is that it brings us full circle back to what some of this ancient indigenous knowledge has always said. And now we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we just found out in a study that is right. It's like
what's been known for thousands of years from the mystics and
so it's I think it's just so beautiful that that is the case with quantum biology, because again, when you look at the history of science with the scientific revolution, it was like, if anything is real, then we will see it under a microscope. We will extract it as humans, as the scientists, right? As the master of nature. We will find the truth and extract it. And everything else that has been garnered from a relationship with nature and what knowledge that brings, that has no place, right? And so now we're seeing like, oh, wow, this is validating so many different ancient healing traditions and theories and, perspectives of medicine. It feels like the right place to be when something like that happens, rather than shutting down more voices and more intuitive thought.
I think too, as you get into this, at least this has been my experience, like I feel like there's almost like this remembrance, like when you can tap into the power of yourself and whatever modality that is, but the underlying condition being that there is like quantum physics at play, that it's the universal forces that are everywhere, that it to me, that intuition just becomes stronger, and it's kind of like a loop. Like it's like once you start to kind of see it, then you lean into that idea more, and then it becomes more powerful because you have that belief around it. So I think, it's just powerful in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things we are up against, is that a lot of people have absolute beliefs in medical theories, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of time people are saying, well, that's just a theory. And it's like, yes. And what you're talking about and, really trying to uphold is also a theory. And if we could get to a place in science where there was a little more acceptance and gratitude for the mystery of life, and that maybe some of it will remain a mystery, and what we can do is just find the best explanation for what we see in our relationship with ourselves and each other and the world around us, I think we would be so much more free to actually get closer to any kind of truth, because we wouldn't be holding on to these theories. I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about is like I was just speaking with a cardiologist, and this idea of the heart being the physical pump and mover of the blood, and trying to talk with them about how structured water and infrared energy and these quantum ideas are also impacting cardiovascular health. And it's just like, nope, that's a crazy theory. And it's like, well, so is the heart being the only mover of the blood, like, I mean, let's just expand our mind. And, when we're talking about quantum physics, you can have two things be true at the same time.
Right.
You can explore two paths without validating or discrediting either one. And that is something that we should really start modeling in our scientific pursuits.
I love that. You said so many beautiful things at once. Oh my gosh. Can we have some things being mysterious? Can we have can we be open-minded enough to explore and maybe not know, and maybe leave that as a mystery, because we really don't know. We don't know everything. And I think we both did Journey of Intrinsic Health, Brooke and I, and we did Coach's Journey of Intrinsic Health with Dr. Zach Bush. And we were both deeply impacted by it, and we changed how we think and how we interact with clients. And he does allow for space for nature, for curiosity to be part of a paradigm shift within our field.
Absolutely. And it's just mind-boggling that we would have a therapy, a modality that we clearly see working, and we don't know why it's working, so we discredit it because we can't figure out the mechanism of action. It's like, oh, what in the world is going on? If you are trying to heal, if you're in a health crisis and someone is taking away a tool that works because they don't know how it works, that is a huge problem, and something that we see all the time. We see it all the time. Shamani Jain and her work around biofield medicine and the power that things like Reiki and healing touch and distant healing, it's clear. It is so clear from the research, from the peer-reviewed, PubMed research that anybody would want to hang their hat on. It's clear that there's a benefit from this, yet people continually dismiss it because, like, how does that work? How could that work? It's like, why do we need to know every last thing if there's a benefit there. There's a beautiful magic happening or something we don't know yet, or a mechanism we haven't discovered. And to place that on the sidelines and let people's health suffer is so not the camp I want to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that Dr. Bruce Lipton, he says that quantum biology restores purposefulness of evolution. So this new biology defines how thoughts, attitudes, beliefs create the conditions of our body and our place in our world. And I know that the downward positional model, it flips our experience of the world upside down. So how does that idea, in your opinion, change medicine? If you can talk a little bit about that, and the concept in terms of your relationship, your entanglement hierarchy between the practitioner and the client, and the process of evolution. How does that affect it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's sort of where I got my start with all this, was in that idea of psychoneuroimmunology. It was actually one of my mentors, my teachers, and my doctor, Dr. Sacha Ambrose. She's absolutely incredible. And she was like, kept nudging me, have you thought about your thoughts and how that might play? Well, and I was doing clinic rotations with her, and she kept being like, do you see how their thoughts impacted this? Do you see, like, come on board here. And I was really resistant because I knew it and didn't want to own it. And it was that simple. And so there's that idea that our thoughts and the frequency of our emotions impacting our health is very profound. And when I was in that healing crisis, I was very anxious. I had a lot of anxiety. And when someone says to you, well, your thoughts impact your health, and you're anxious with these racing thoughts almost seemingly out of your control, right? That's a really scary thing to hear. It's like, shoot, well, what do I do? My thoughts are making me sick, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. But the power of a conscious, intentional thought to rewire those subconscious, patterns that we've had since childhood, or epigenetically from our parents and our grandparents and great grandparents, we really underestimate the power of that. So when I'm talking about how our thoughts and emotions impact our health, I always want to make sure that anyone listening who maybe is having anxious thoughts or depressive thoughts or ruminating thoughts that just keep coming up, this is a script that keeps playing in our head, and we don't have to get rid of it. We need to add intentional thoughts that balance that, right? Because we're meant to have all of those feelings. We're meant to be sad. We're meant to be anxious and angry and frustrated and loving and feel gratitude and all the different things. It's when we become stuck in that one pattern that it can become problematic, right? So the power of an intentional thought, it doesn't mean that if you have anxious thoughts, you are doomed to sickness, right? Or if you are dealing with sickness or a health crisis, you have to always be having these thoughts of gratitude and be chipper and positive. No, it means that when we can recognize those scripts in our head and add an additional intentional thought that is gratitude or just loving acceptance or whatever it might be, that has so much more power to pave a new neurological pathway. So And when we talk about what kind of power they do have over our biology, we know from just a conventional sense that our thoughts and emotions are impacting our chemical status, right? Our neurotransmitters, our hormones, our inflammatory state. And they also seem to be impacting our quantum biology, how our mitochondria function, the frequency of a certain thought to impact our heart rate variability and our heart coherence and our ability to act as a whole unified self, right? There's so many different layers of that. And I remember one time in school, one of my teachers said, our job as a doctor, as a healer, is to hold your patient's heart and to give them that sense of whatever it is they might have been missing, right? In that little visit, we have the opportunity to show them safety, maybe for the first time in their life, to show them gratitude, to show them love. So many of us in the healing professions and doctors and chiropractors and health coaches and nurses and all of these things really look at like the physical things, like, okay, do you have this medication and do you have this exercise, right? And without ever addressing the heart of that patient, the emotional status. And what I really try to be mindful of with myself, with my patients, and really with the people I'm interacting with is that we have an ability to offer that emotional status to someone else that is having trouble getting there on their own. And that, if we think about it, has a massive impact on society as a whole. That emotional coherence that I have and that I can transfer to another person is like a ripple. It's a wave that goes out from person to being to person to being across the community, the society. I mean, globally, we see that as well. And it's just an absolutely profound yet completely underutilized tool, I think, in the medical profession.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. I love too how you brought up like to have like the heart there and holding space, because when you were talking about like, that your thoughts and the anxieties that you have can often lead to physical conditions or, the way that you're presenting, certain symptoms. But I think that oftentimes maybe that is dismissed in a bit because people don't want that radical responsibility, in the sense that, they can control, they have that much power to help themselves heal. But at that same token, when as a healer coming, like holding space and having like that heart connection allows that container for them to safely, start to recognize the patterns that they have. So I think that that's such a key, that you can't have that cold, white jacket mentality of checking the boxes and stuff when you are dealing in this realm. That there has to be that trust and interaction and holding that space. So I think that that's just how so beautiful how you ended that and saying that piece.
It's isn't it interesting how like our humanness has been removed from medicine?
Mm-hmm.
Even doctors who are talking about how emotions impact our health and how are you managing your stress? These things aren't foreign to mainstream medicine, but the way that they're delivered, like you said, white coat checklist, like managing your stress and blah, 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 where if we could just meet as two humans talking about emotions and just the state of being human in this world, it is a journey, and at times it's very heavy. And to not have space and acknowledgement of that from a healer, from a doctor, from whomever it is you're seeking care from, is just, it's so disappointing to see that, because that's what it is. Our humanity, our humanness is what heals us. That is the bridge that we can use to connect to each other, connect to the world around us, to gain that healing. And so much of our modern day life is just this, isolated, okay, patient number 4, come in, and I'm the doctor, and there are you, and we are dealing, and there's your checklist. And then you get in your car, and then somebody's honking and flipping you off as they, you're like, oh, I just constantly not being human. And that the impact of that is enormous. And I think so many of us right now are just desperately seeking some humanity, some humanness out there. So I think it's really, really important for us to remember as practitioners that might be the single most important thing when it comes to medicine. And of course, Western medicine is amazing at emergency medicine, and so very grateful for that. But that's one piece of it, and the rest of it seems to be lacking this humanity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I have a question. So we find it to be really challenging to live in modern environment with houses, electric fields that vibrate at 60 hertz and not being connected to the earth. So some, do their grounding, go, bare feet in the soil. We have crystals all around the house. We have EMF pendants, and some don't believe in it at all. But after reading The Body Electric by Robert Becker, I noticed that, for me, it does wreak havoc on my health and my physiological state, and that, electric fields and photons are essential components of true living systems. What is your take on that, and what do you offer your students and clients when it comes to your practice?
I have a similar take. I think I absolutely think that our electromagnetic environment, our light environment, has a huge impact on our health. And so many times we see, especially as a naturopathic doctor, right? You have people who are like, I am exercising right, I am eating right, I have taken all the supplements. Why aren't I better? And I really like to use the analogy of just like, you're not in your place in the world. We've all kind of put together a puzzle, right? And sometimes you get a piece of the puzzle that you can see from the picture, that's the right puzzle piece, that's where it goes, but the size is just a little bit frayed. It's not fitting exactly in the puzzle. And I think so many of us are feeling that. We aren't fully connected to our place, and that is a source of constant irritation. And when we are able to connect with that natural world, then that irritation and what I was saying, that laundry list of I've done all these things and none of them are working, that really starts to look differently when we readjust or realign our relationship with the world around us and find our true place. And, it comes back to this human nature to really raise ourselves above everything else, right? And so even when we're talking about the natural world, I hear people say like, okay, well, I go outside and I get my morning sun, I put my feet on the earth and I drink good water, and then I do my life. And then I do something else at night to, ensure all these things that this crazy lady's talking about. But there's not that relationship. That the midwife that I worked with for so long, she taught me that we all have a song to offer the earth. And if we can find that song and sing it to the earth, everything changes. And she was right. And it doesn't have to be an actual physical song, but that is what I'm talking about. But just that relationship with the world around us, it's not about going and extracting the right photons from the sunlight. And I got my electrons from the earth and like, okay, and now I can deal. It's truly, once we cultivate this relationship, we can find that safety that we are seeking in the dirt beneath our feet, in the trees around us, in the sound of a bird chirping or the buzzing of an insect nearby us. These are not just pieces to be ignored. They are relationships just like we have in our intimate lives, in our family, in our community. And of course, it makes sense that we're struggling with this idea of relationship, because I see people struggling with it on so many fronts, all those things, our intimate relationships, our family, our community, our society. We all are, I see, struggling with that ability to relate, to have a relationship, to meet in relationship, not in agreement, not in a team sport kind of, we're meeting and we're on the same team so we can relate to each other. True relationship where we are giving and receiving, and the world around us is doing the same thing. I think that's a big missing piece of medicine and just society in general right now.
Yeah.
It's a relationship, not a one-hit wonder. This needs to be I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've heard, I think it's Dr. Bush that talks about like an orchestra, and that so when you were talking about this song that we all sing, it's so true, like that if we can all find like that vibrational, frequency that we're at, is what I was kind of coming to mind, and that it all just makes this beautiful melody together, where one of those notes just by itself isn't going to really, it's like, okay, whatever, this is fine, but it's playing together, and that relationship makes it all beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something very undervalued right now about some of those practices, about singing, about dancing, about relating to the world around us, that I think are truly medicinal. And we've walked so far away from them. When I talk to people and tell them that story about how my midwife, Anita Rojas is her name, she would say, you have to find your song. And I'm so intellectual, so I'm like, what is my song? How do I figure out what my song are? Like, what's the tune? What's the melody? What's your song?
Yeah. Tell me what I need to do to find my song.
Yeah, right.
And it's step by step.
Yeah, exactly. For too long, I stayed in that spot. And I realized once I started exploring that it was the exploration. It was the journey to find a song that felt like mine, that was medicinal, not just the giving of the song to the earth. It's the journey of finding that self-expression that I think so many of us don't have in our daily lives. I didn't, I know. And opening up that window of self-expression is medicinal. And it's medicinal not only to us, but to the world around us. It's just a beautiful illustration of how our ecosystem works.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Brooke, do you have any more questions? I can talk quantum physics and quantum biology for days. I love this subject.
I know. No, I don't think so. I would love, maybe we can have you on later at some point, because water, we've dived into that before, but I feel like that's its own, as you were bringing that up there, I think there's so much opportunity there. But I guess just to close, like, please let us know, like our audience know too, like how, where we can find you and the best way, what courses or things that you offer, your offerings.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Dr. Catherine Clinton, sort of everywhere. I didn't get creative with it. So my website is drcatherineclinton.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at drcatherineclinton.com or Dr. Catherine Clinton. And I love sharing this information. Like I said before, I really do believe that this is a grassroots movement from the bottom up, from the people. And so the more we can talk about this, the more we can share this information, the faster that change that we need will happen. So I am constantly sharing this information as much as I can. I do have courses on my website, absolutely, but I really do just share this information a lot on social media and everywhere I can, because if I can plant a seed somewhere, then the garden will grow faster. So in that sense, thank you so much for having me today and letting me plant some seeds, hopefully.
Yes, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Thank
and
you
just
for coming on.
for our audience, just remember that our looking changes everything. So it collapses objects from possibility to actuality. And this mystery, as Dr. Catherine Clinton talked about, if properly addressed and dived into, can change our worldview. So keep an open mind and keep that mystery alive. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Clinton. It was a pleasure for us to have you as our guest.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for having me on and for exploring topics like this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.